Okay, let's compile the kernel. Okay. This is some cool stuff. If I can type right, jeez. All right. This is my source directory. I have various things in here. Kernel, I put it all here. Okay, this is the kernel right here. tar xf x vf Linux, boom. Now you will probably have to add some dependencies. You'll have to install some things, to get this to work the way I have it working. I do have it in my blog, so for instance, this, the xconfig, we're going to do that, and that's going to require some graphic libraries. So first we do make oldconfig. This should work on your system. It's supposed to pull the old config file from whatever kernel you're running. The kernel that you're running is going to be a lot older than this kernel. So that's going to mean it's going to ask you a lot of questions. And I honestly, I just hit enter and just let it go, because you're going to change things later. So that's okay. At any rate, make old config. Whoa. Wait a second, what? Oh, man, I'm really messing up for this. All right, make old config. Okay, so we do that. It's not going to ask me any questions because I'm already running a 4.18 kernel, and you can check by this. So right there, I'm already running 4.18.9. We are trying to build 4.18.11. There's not enough difference, nothing major, so it's not asking me questions here. And but for you, you're going to be asked a lot of questions. Okay, now we're going to make xconfig. Now I've cheated here. Okay, I've already tweaked this. Yours is going to be a mess. So make xconfig. You're going to see this window pop up. If you don't, you need a dependency. All right, let me scoot this over. I know my camera is probably... This is very important. Everything here has to do with the kernel, and there are so many things that you can tweak. Okay, this is really powerful stuff. Really, really powerful stuff. And then for the compiling process, we're going to do a little extra. Because I'm extra. You know what I'm saying? All right, so now there may be some things in here that I don't understand well enough to tweak, and so I might be kind of shooting myself in the foot in some ways. That's a tough one. Okay, you're always going to be learning here. The first thing that I do change the processor type. Okay, and if you see here, processor type and features. Okay, I have an AMD, so I want to make sure that mine says Opteron, Athlon 64, that kind of thing for processor family. If you're running an Intel, obviously you want something like the Core 2. Don't go with generic, for God's sakes. We're not doing this so that you can compile a generic kernel. Generic kernel is what you get when you install Ubuntu. Okay? You can have that anytime you want. We want something specifically designed to be coded for the CPU that you're running. So this is important. Now there are some features on here. Okay, so this is a mistake. I don't have an Intel. So the Intel low power subsystem, as far as I know, I shouldn't have that. Some of these things I don't. Here's another Intel. I don't want that. I've also removed this, support for extended non-PC. This is a PC, so I got rid of that. Unfortunately, I don't know a lot about some of this to remove it. Now, very important, you will get a little bit of help along the way here. So let me find an example. Here, right here. If unsure, say yes. This is compiling your Linux kernel for dummies. Okay, it's all in there, so there's no worry. However, after you do this and you compile the kernel and it's installed and you boot to that kernel, it might not boot. And if it doesn't boot, you've screwed something up, but no problem. You can select what your old kernel and go back to that. You can do that through the menu, and we're going to talk about that. For that, I use something called grub customizer. Okay, this is very, very useful. But I think when you install the kernel without grub customizer, it's still going to present you a menu when you first boot. So I think you'll be safe. But as you can see, here's the generic kernels, right? Here's the generic. I don't want those. I want my kernel. Okay? So I'm going to bump that up, and then we're gonna save it. So when I boot, I'm first going to see my 4.18.9. Okay. Now I'm about to install the 4.18.11. So when I'm done compiling it and installing it, I'm going to come back to this grub customizer and I'm going to move that up because I want that to be the first kernel to boot. Okay. Grub customizer, you will have to add that separately. For Ubuntu derivatives, you're going to have to do add a PPA. Okay. So there's a lot of things in here that you can optimize. And don't say no to some of these. See, this gives you a warning. If unsure, say no here. Okay, no, that's wrong. Sorry. Hyper-threading, you definitely don't want to say no there. Oh man, that's bad. Listen, you know whether you have hyper-threading or not, okay? AMD, these new Ryzens do have hyper-threading. That was a really big deal for this new CPU. Everybody should know that hyper-threading is part of it. Multi-core scheduler, duh. Okay, what CPU do you know that's got a single core now? So multi-core, we want yes. Now, preemptive model, I've kind of bounced around with this. I used to do preemptive kernel, low latency, but then I used Manjaro, excuse me, Jesus. And it was really snappy, and they were using the voluntary kernel preemptive, okay, the desktop one. I thought it was good, so I switched. So in my opinion, this is the best one, but you could try out this, the preemptive. That's what I used to use. It does seem fast. And you could be getting rid of things that you're not going to use. Okay. Oh, and this is important. Timer frequency. I got it up to 1,000. Now I think Manjaro, I want to say theirs is at a conservative 300, but we're at 1,000. So, and it does seem to be pretty fast. But we're going to get rid of some things too. So I do the search, debug. You don't need debugging stuff. You're not going to debug anything. You're not a developer. So you want to get that crap out of there. This one encouraged me to say yes, so I just said yes. But everything else I said no to. Got rid of. What's this? When in doubt, say yes. I left that one. I felt a little too intimidated by the defaults and the suggestions. Okay, that's fine. Debug PCI Express. I don't know what to say here. Don't know. I'm going to leave it. So you can leave it. This one was suggested to say yes, but I'm kind of wondering. The scheduler is very important. I'm going to leave that. I'm going to leave this. Okay. Later you can take this all out, and if you write a note to yourself, like, hey, I took this out, this might be dicked up, then go ahead and do it. For now, I'm going with this. Now the next thing I want to search for, profiling. This profile, I think this is on by default. God, this will hose up this will slow your system down. Get rid of it. So anything with profiling the kernel, turn that off, for God's sakes. Trace, we don't want to trace anything, okay? We want this to go fast. Okay, now buffer. You know what? There is a sound buffer, and I always change this, and I find it very useful. Sound card. There it is. Pre-allocated buffer size for HD audio. So I noticed in some games the sound was kind of skipping, you know, and so I knew that the default sound buffer was 64. So I raised it. I raised it up to the example that they give you, 2048. I figured that's fine, and it did make a difference. Honestly, I swear to God. So I recommend that. I really do. Now, one thing to note, when you finally do get a kernel that will boot and doesn't crash and everything's good, you want to save that config. Very important. Okay? In fact, let's do that right now. So, I'm going to save this. I'm going to quit. Your config is right here. That's the config. It's not very big either. Now, I'll show you what it looks like. Config. See, it's just a text file. You could edit it, but don't edit it with a text editor. It even tells you at the beginning, don't edit. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy this config to config backup. So, you know, I'm always going to have it. I know that this is going to work. And that config backup file that I just created, that I just copied, you can use that later when you download another kernel, even a very new one, and you can rename it to, you know, .config, and then do make old config, and it should fix everything up. Okay, so let's go back to xconfig. Okay, schedulers. You know, this is a tough one. This is something you probably want to dig into. Manjaro does this really cool thing where they patch the kernel and they add a different scheduler, and I don't remember what it was called, but it did seem like that was a badass scheduler. The scheduler is one of the most powerful things about Linux, I think, about the kernel, that beats Windows, but you know, whatever. And memory management, that kind of thing. I think I'm just using some kind of default here. I have tried deadline and no-op, but it does seem like the CFQ is better. You know, I can enable these, but I don't know that they work. I think you might, after booting, have to tell it to explicitly use it, I think. I don't know. So this is something that, you know, you could do research in and you know, potentially one-up the performance, and that's the important thing. Okay. Okay. So we can remove things. I'm trying to think of a good example of something I haven't removed yet. Look, I'm not going to use Macintosh. I'm not going to use an Atari partition. I mean, it is cool to be able to see any kind of a partition. You know, to be able to read files off of any hard drive. That's cool. But you can also remove it and potentially, you know, lower the kernel overhead and speed up things. You know, you could. So you've got a couple of angles here. Remove stuff, you know, possibly get a little bit more performance, lower overhead, but also have less features. Okay. But a lot of these features you're really not going to use. Anything with ARM, you're not going to use ARM. You're not going to use, I mean, unless you're building it for a Raspberry Pi, you're not going to use it. ARM, no, I don't. Karma, whoa. No, okay, so I have all that turned off. We're okay. Now, for graphics, this is a little touchy for the NVIDIA people. Oh, and I apologize. Let me go down real quick to file systems. Okay, I have streamlined my ext4. As you can see, I don't have any of these enabled. Okay, I also did not enable ext3 because ext4 can read 3, so we don't need 3. So I got rid of that. Everything else that's enabled here should be okay. And I don't know that you can mess with it and then successfully boot your kernel. And we do kind of want to boot the kernel. Here, if you have a CD-ROM, you know, or if you plan to hook up a CD-ROM, you're going to want to have these enabled. If you want to read Microsoft partitions, which you do because a flash drive is probably going to be FAT32 or NTFS, you definitely want to enable all these. And I don't even do these as a module. Oh, and here's your choices. You have yes, you have no, and you have M. Okay? If you say yes, you're enabling the feature. If you say no, you're disabling the feature. It will not compile. It will not be added to the kernel. If you're selecting M, that means you're creating a module that can be loaded and unloaded on the fly. And probably that's the best way to go, honestly. But for a few important things, I say yes because I want it in the kernel all the time. I don't want it to be loaded or unloaded. FAT32, for instance, I left it in there. I said yes, but the other things are a module. Trying to think of a good example. See, these are modules. That's a module. Native language support, all modules. I said yes to everything because I don't know what file system or what files I'm going to be loading, so I said yes. Don't know what the hell that is. Whoops. I don't know what this is, so I'm just going to module that. If you don't know what something is, just say module. If you suspect it's important, good luck. Okay, now one thing that's important is the GPU. Let's go up to that. Sound card graphics. Okay, this is a tough one. If you're running the NVIDIA proprietary drivers, you're not going to want to enable Nouveau, I don't think, personally. I say no. One of these will interfere with the NVIDIA, and I'm not sure what that is. And I don't... Here's the tough part. You're going to probably have to play around with this. Okay, so I enabled this because that's the chip that I have. If you have Intel, obviously you want to enable that and don't enable this. But notice I said yes. I don't want this as a module. I want to say yes. I want it in the kernel. Now for some of the AMD people, here's your AMD GPU right there. I believe that's the open source. And you're going to want to say yes if it lets you. It does not let me. So module's it. It's a module. Intel people, if you don't have a graphics card and you're using the graphics from your Intel CPU, you're going to want this. You want to say module. Definitely you're going to want that. And that one's been greatly improved. Surprisingly well. It works very well. Okay. Oh, here's an AMD library routine. I don't have it enabled for some reason. That you might want to look into if you're AMD. Frame buffer. Okay, I'm sorry. Frame buffer is the one that will interfere with drivers. I have an NVIDIA, so I have to make this a module. If I say yes to this frame buffer, I think the system doesn't boot, so be careful. I thought AMD's driver is here. Maybe it was moved, or am I imagining things? Here's your Intel ATI. Yeah, I don't know what to say about the AMD. This is the frame buffer. Shoot. And the AMD GPU driver is what I'm super curious about. I'm really hoping somebody will do this with the AMD GPU and tell me how it works, because I'm really curious. Now, there are some people that will give you the config to their kernel. You might be able to find one on the web, you know, just as an example. You can install a brand new kernel from Ubuntu, maybe one that was customized a little bit, but is general enough to work on every computer. And then you could install that and then run make oldconfig, right? And it'll copy that kernel config over. You can do that. I have done that before when I've really fucked up my config bad, and it works. Okay, now another thing that's very important, I'm going to copy this config because I really don't. Whoop. Okay, I don't want to mess things up. You're going to want to do make local config. Okay, no, yes, that's how you want to do. Make local config. This is, okay, I gotta explain how this works. This is going to look to see what modules are currently like activated, okay, kind of like drivers. So for instance, if you have a webcam, it needs to see that module, and when it sees that module, it'll change the config to add that module, but only if it's activated. So here's the trick. This is really weird. You want to take, for instance, a flash drive. You want to make sure that your USB and your flash drive are supported. Plug the flash drive in, mount it, and then hit make local config. Basically, all the devices that you use, joystick, you know, whatever, gamepad, whatever, steering wheel, webcam, keyboard, Bluetooth, you need to activate them, get them running, get them working, and then type make local config. Now I'm going to do that. Okay, so now it's saying that there was a mistake. Wait, did I do this wrong? Make local config. Shoot. I may have screwed this up. It's make mod config, make local mod config, make local mod config. It's been so long since I've used that. Okay, damn. Make local mod config. I apologize. So what it's doing now is it sees a module, it sees the NVIDIA proprietary modules, and it doesn't know what they are because it's not in the kernel. Remember, this is proprietary driver. Us NVIDIA guys are screwed because NVIDIA, they're dicks about the open source thing. They can fuck off, just like, you know, Linus Torvalds said. At any rate, it's not here, so we don't concern ourselves with that error. There's nothing we can do. Now, when we go back to xconfig, we will see that there have been some changes made. The most obvious is it always turns this off. I don't know why. Oh, it didn't do it. Oh, damn. Usually changes these. It removes my some of those things. Oh, it got rid of the ISO CD-ROM support. Obviously, I don't have a CD-ROM in my computer, and it sees that there are no modules loaded for CD-ROM. So it's like, fuck that. So it'll get rid of it. So it will get rid of that module. It'll say no. Okay, so now we see what's going on. So this is a way to streamline. Okay, this is a way that you can intelligently, you know, streamline your system. And we just save. We make the little corrections and we save it. And then we exit. Okay. So now here's the hard part. Let's see. History. I can't remember the command for this, and I don't want to look it up, but let's see. Okay, so to make the kernel, to build the kernel, I've made a lot of things since then, so I might have to pause the video. Oh, Jesus. I gotta pause it? Are you kidding me? I don't have it here. I'm not ready for this. Okay, well, let's go to my Dropbox. Dropbox. Ubuntu. Oh, are you serious? Oh, man. Okay. Kernel. And I bet I don't have it queued up. Oh, this, yes. No, that's the old way. That doesn't work anymore. Oh, for crying out loud. I just did this the other day. So this process has been changed a couple of times, and now a lot of things don't work. Oh, here it is. I apologize. Okay, right here. This command here. I'm hoping that you can see this. Sudo make -j quote end process. Okay, so this is the command right here, and this is the one that you're going to want to use to build your kernel. And let's talk about this real quick. This command J, this will use all your CPU cores, all the cores. Now, if you're building your kernel on a laptop, I'm going to be honest, if you use all the cores, you might overheat the laptop. You might. Laptops don't cool very well, and if it's an old one, it's whatever. So you may want to reduce this. If you know that you have 8 cores, if you have a laptop and it has 4 cores, 8 threads, then you might want to reduce it to, I don't know, 6, because it counts the threads as, you know, so you have 4 and 4, whatever. You just cut it in half. Cut it in half. But if you know your computer's not going to overheat, then just leave that. Now, we want to change the C flags. Now, some people, I don't know what your jurisprudence is on this one, but I do 03. Some people warn that that's too much for the kernel, it's going to make it unstable. I haven't had a problem with it. What I don't do, I haven't done this. But you could try it. Why not? I mean, that's what this is about. So I'm happy with 03. And then, this is very important, do march equals native. So what this is going to do is it is going to build the kernel with optimized code for your specific CPU. And this is why we do this process. This is crazy. And this is for the other flags. And I don't know, I'll be honest, I don't know if the kernel uses CPP, C++. I don't think it uses it, to tell you the truth. I think it just uses C, and I think that's it. Okay, and then this bind deb package. This is what creates the package. All right, so we're going to do this right now. Okay. And this is going to take a little while. Now, I have a Ryzen 8-core, 16-thread CPU, so it's not going to take that long. I don't have to go make a sandwich. If you're running, you know, an older CPU, you're going to have to go make a sandwich. It's going to take a while. I think on my old server, I think it takes, I don't know, I want to say 20 minutes. So when this is done, it'll produce these deb packages. You're actually only going to install 2 of them. It's going to produce a third one, and I believe that's for well, we'll see it here in a minute, but if you install that, I think it's going to a little bit hose up your system. Don't do it. We only want the Linux image, and we want the headers. And it's very important, another very important thing. First, install the headers.
first. Install that deb package first. Then install the image, and then you're done. And I feel like I've forgotten something here, but you can see the M in there. It's creating some modules. This kernel, it has a lot of things. I added support for like every possible cam, and media devices. Oh, it's almost. I think it's finishing. Dang, that's actually really fast. It's doing the wrap up now. So we're going, yep, it's wrapping it up. There's one deb, there's the headers. We're going to install that first. Come on now. That libc, do not install libc. I don't know why it doesn't. It makes the system wacky. Doesn't make sense to me, but I'm not a developer. Whatever. Sudo pkg Linux. Whoop. Oh, you have to go up a directory or dpkg. Whoop. Sudo dpkg and then Linux headers. See how that works. Boom. Okay. Now we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to do the image. Boom. Not libc. If anybody can explain that, I would appreciate it, but libc doesn't work. I want to say it's system specific somehow. I don't know. Okay, now we can get rid of that. We're done. We go here. Now, grub customizer should see something right there. So this is our boom. And you know what? I don't want, I want it to boot a little bit sooner than that. Okay. And I don't really use Windows 10 very often, but I'll move it up. Okay, remember, this may not work. You just created this. It may not work. So you may have to go back to this. So you don't want to fuss too much with it. So we're going to boot to this by default, but we're going to keep everything else. You're not going to uninstall any kernel. So we save it. Don't, just let it do its thing. Boom. We're done. Okay. So now we're going to try and boot it. We'll see. Good luck. Fingers crossed.